everybody. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through High Vibe, the creatures that were stirring were cats and Leo Kings. And me too.
And sprites.
And sprites.
Yeah, we're doing this live today to just wish everybody, happy holidays and what a crazy year, and just have a little talk with everyone and be in the chat. We are live on High Vibe on the app, of course, and we're on YouTube as well. Mm-hmm. And let me pull out my 3 phones, since I'm calling what used to be Instagram Commugram now. If you didn't know, if you didn't watch, I went live earlier today on Instagram.
I missed that. I didn't see.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't see you call it Commugram.
Commugram. But I hope everybody's having a good holiday. It's kind of interesting. Christmas Eve always was filled with so many people and family and a lot of things growing up, of course. And then I don't know. Is it when you get into your mid-30s into your later 30s, it just stops, unless I guess you have your own children. But if you're single.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't know that part because I had children in my mid-30s or
cats,
early 30s.
You have one
yeah,
of them,
I know.
right? So it's like, oh, okay, that's my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But,
I mean, because for me it turned into preparing for Christmas and doing all the fun stuff on the other side of things, right? Getting everything ready for Santa to come, cooking up, baking the cookies for Santa and all that. So Christmas Eve was always fun for that.
Right, yeah, that's something, oops, Mike. Oh, did my mic turn off?
Oh, no. Mine.
I sat down on my mic and it muted it. I'm sure that they can hear me now.
I saw that. I can see the monitor going, so I'm pretty sure they can. Sorry, and I'm sitting here trying to pull up the show so I could see the chat.
We're doing this with nobody else here, so, it's a lot to run all this stuff. Yeah, no, I'm sure you got me now. So.
It looks like it is metering over there, so.
Yeah. So Merry Christmas. What I was saying earlier was it's really weird growing up, having, Christmas Eve for me was surrounded by people my whole life. Mm-hmm. So many family members. And then, I don't know, maybe it's, I've been divorced 2 years now and I'm single and I'm a business owner. We had a great Christmas thing here with the people of High Vibe.
Mm-hmm. That was fun.
And so that was wonderful. And it's wonderful that you're here and you have your own kids and you even have a roast in, and we're going to not be on too long because she's got to get to that.
Yes.
But we just wanted to be here and just let people know that we all appreciate you. It's been one crazy year. And I know I want to thank Anne first here for being on High Vibe. She's been such a huge part of High Vibe. If y'all didn't know, she's been with us for over a year, but this year really was the year that you came into the fold really big, and you've just been a huge part of it. And if y'all don't know, behind the business and behind all the shows and the shows that you do yourself, you've made this place operate so much better and made it feel like a true home within a home that it is already for people.
Oh, well.
For people that aren't in the home, you've made it feel like a home.
Well, that's great to hear. I hope I have. And you've made it feel like a home for me. So thank you for that. This has been one of the best years of my life, I think. It's been so fun being here and watching everything go on and seeing how you respond to the events of 2020 and being part of something that I feel like is really making a big difference for people. So, thank you for all the work you've been doing this year, because you've been going nonstop, and actually you've been going nonstop since I've met you. So I don't know if that's just normal for your whole life, that you've always been going nonstop. So to have
Pretty
Christmas
normal.
Eve be quiet, that's probably a nice treat for you, isn't it? Or
the quiet for me, this goes into some spiritual things, but before I get into that, I just want to say thank you again, and I love you, and then I want to thank everybody out there. That it is everybody out there, whether you're in Leo King YouTube world or whether you're in High Vibe, that you are what make High Vibe a home, And high vibe is, it really isn't about the Leo King. It's about, there's so many people. It's the people too themselves.
Right, definitely.
And, you know, my Leo ego had to shift a lot of that. Although it was actually pretty easy for me to do, believe it or not.
I've never encountered your Leo ego. I don't see that at all. I mean, I understand, yes, being confident in yourself and being sure of who you are, and but that's why people want to follow you. I don't know. I don't see you as somebody who is governed by an ego. So.
Well, that's nice to hear. See?
Now
she's got to own that one for the rest of her life. I could play this back forever. And when people call me Mr. Ego all through the 2020s.
Well, I didn't know that you wouldn't.
I'll just be like, yo, so, Ann, you know, sorry, Dr. Ann. So anyway, I just want to thank everybody out there. But I wanted to say about the energy of like go, 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 go. That's why I'm really into human design, because I feel that it describes, it's using astrology, but it describes people's not only their auras and whether they're an energy type or a non-energy type of personality. And of course, I'm an energy type, and I'm a pure manifesting generator. So my motor centers are connected, and that throat chakra is deeply, extremely connected in my 2034 to my sacral. And then if you look at my chart, I have 7 channels. It's pretty rare, where they're actually centers that are actually connecting. And I have complete empty solar plexus and complete empty head, like the Anja, and the complete empty, like not even a gate is defined. Like just empty, empty, empty.
I have to look at mine. I know mine is sacral and root are defined.
Which is good.
And then something over here.
Like, you're a generator, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, but we're energy types. So, I mean, you're a go, go, go person too. But like I was talking to, you know, I know a lot of projectors, right? And like they feel like they have to be very go, go, go. But really, it always gets them sick, or they kind of can get lost in that too. And you have to wait for the invitation. And it depends. There's 5 different kinds of projectors. Whereas like, you know, it's sacral or emotional for generators or manifestors. Pretty much the same thing, right? But it's like, when you get into projectors,
lots of different types of
there's lots of different kind of projectors. There's like self-projected projector, emotional projector, sacral projector. There's a lot of different projectors. So, but of course your profile adds to all that. But to answer your question of go, go, go my whole life, yeah, I mean, as a manifesting generator, I think it's very hard and a pure one. And not to say that like, because I, you know, that's the thing is like, there's manifesting generators, but there's emotional ones, and then there's sacral ones, and then there's like pure sacral ones, like where the actual sacral is really deeply connected to the throat, exactly with that channel, and connecting in different ways through all the channels. So like I literally, my whole life in my astrology is a Leo, square Pluto, and with the moon in Taurus and Mars in Scorpio, and having all those like very dominant positions is just, I don't really know anything else. So the stillness to me is not my peace. Yeah. I'm actually more at peace flying through things than I am sitting.
That's good that you know that.
I mean,
and people know that
talk.
Too.
Like when we did this, right? When Maya did this, which she's not here, but Maya's another person to appreciate so much for High Vibe. But when she helped me with this, you know, I didn't realize that I've had more deep conversations in my personal life, or sometimes even like more that I wanted to bring to High Vibe and YouTube this year, but it got crazy, which was, this was about these kind of conversations sitting here and to go deeper into those talks. We do it though on the main stage, but
Maya, by the way, sent me a text and she said the show is not working on the app. So yeah.
Hold on.
Just a little bit of a break here as we fix the video. So the YouTube audience is out there, but nobody on our app.
That's very weird.
checking out the YouTube.
I can
audience.
still be talking, so.
All right.
Oh, it was the wrong stream key. Now it'll show up on the app.
All right. Yeah.
That's life.
Good. All right. So now people will join us on the app too.
Yeah, so I think, human design is important. But I also think that there's so many other divination tools. And, you were talking about books earlier and all the kind of different books I have in here.
I love your books.
It's kind of a crazy collection.
Yeah.
A lot of people that probably watch this stuff would like to go through my book collection. This isn't my whole collection either. But there's a lot in here. And a lot of it that, the presentations that I do and so forth, there's stuff in here. I mean, you've seen it. I tag pages and I like scan them and put them on some of the older ones. And so I think that it's a funny thing, since you're a history professor and I'm an astrologer, for me it was like, okay, I do a lot of the work just through charts, but then there's you have to use the history. So before I met you, I was just, okay, that's the area I got to find, so I'm going to just go there. And one thing you told me that resonated with me so much this year, that's helped me out a lot to just feel normal, is that you just don't go researching into random places in history without knowing where you're going. And when you told me that, it made me feel good, because astrology is so precise with exactly where I'm looking for in history.
Right. Yeah, so that's a great way to start. That's one thing I love about astrology now that I know more about it. I love to have a reason to go in and research something about history, right? To pinpoint what was happening at the same time that the last time there was a grand conjunction like this, right?
Right.
So you can go research it, and you do a great job. I mean, you are a great researcher, so that is...
that's where I find a lot of peace, is researching and digging into things. But I love history the most in my life. There's something... I love to sit in an old room that's 500 years old. There's something that just gets my fancy off. I don't know what it is.
I love that too. So I totally understand.
And Indiana Jones was my hero. So
Yeah.
And archaeology was something I really wanted to go into when I was younger.
Why didn't you go into it? What happened?
Because I started to think like Indiana Jones was a great example of somebody who was a history professor and archaeology professor, but then went in real life and didn't. So he would wear his glasses, remember, and look all slick and have the suspenders.
And have all the students in love with him.
All the students in love with him, but then he totally was this rough and tough, adventurer. And I remember just being like, okay, he has to be this teacher, though.
I know. No, and let me just tell you, no professor is like that I've
no,
ever met.
of course. But
Too
it was
bad,
for me. I never thought I would be a teacher in my life, so that's why I didn't go into it. But I didn't realize. I don't even like to call myself a teacher, even though I do a lot of schools and I teach a lot of this subject matter. And I wouldn't call myself a history teacher, because I'm not. But I'm teaching more of the Hermetic, and then this New Age astrology, which really is the progression of where astrology's gone, which astrologers define it as themselves. Basically, the astrology you follow is the one that, and then that happens in with historians. It happens with anybody, or even in where we're at with science today, or anything, right? It's who takes the ball to the next, court, or wherever you want us to call it, right? Who keeps the ball rolling? Who keeps the Olympic torch going, right? And keeps moving it forward instead of, where do you want me to go? There's a lot of that, I feel. I don't know. You're a history professor, so I'm not in more of that.
Well, I was thinking, to go back to when you said that you don't think of yourself as a teacher, or you don't like to call yourself one, right? But you are. I mean, you're very much like a professor from when professors began, right? Because the reason that we even have professors or universities is because people were pursuing knowledge in the way that you do with your astrology, right? And it was like the passion for the knowledge that then people would come around to listen to their lectures because they were, you know, it was like you want to go hear the expert speak.
Right.
I mean, when you think of the philosophers from ancient Greece too, and they were teaching things like astrology and mathematics and everything as well. So when you think about it, you are kind of actually kind of what you're doing is rolling the ball forward in terms of evolving how we teach and how people learn. Because I think now it's pretty clear that there are many quality places to go and learn, whether it's real life or if it's like a more traditional class setting. There's a lot more now than just a university, and especially with the internet. We should be evolving what is a professor, what is a teacher. You know, that should be changing.
Yeah, I think it should. And I feel like with 2020 and this being such a weird year about the CV and so forth and what we're seeing with, you know, it's kind of a weird thing about the thing that's being talked about that's going to go in people's arms to me, because it's a new technology, it's a new science. So there's this perspective that, okay, it's moving science forward. But they already had this idea. They were just like kind of waiting on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So is it really that innovative, right? And what I've seen a lot of this year is not a lot of innovation, right? Like not a lot of it looks like it because it's new, but it's been in the pipeline, and it's been waiting, and they were just waiting for the right excuse or the right moment for it to come out. So it's like, I feel like though that the way that the world was handled, I mean, it's crazy to me seeing the Great Conjunction, they're calling it, right? Grand Conjunction, and how it made the world press, like everywhere, right? Like, and that this hasn't happened in 800 years since, you know, the beginning of the 1200s, right? So it was like a big deal.
Right.
Yet the world right now is just looking on the fixed matters based upon only health, right? Like, whereas like I feel like in anything in life, if we take a school, for example, if there's a problem, like there's different administrators, there's the principals, there's, you know, deans, there's different faculty and staff that everybody has ideas that work out all different kind of subjects or people management or things like that. It's like we've kind of come into this place where there's so many people that could offer insight. Like example, look up. But what they didn't talk about, which was unfortunate, they didn't get any astrologers on mainstream media. As somebody who does that for a living, I was just like, okay, this is like the mainstream media's big moment of like looking at the planets and correlating it with history and time. But it was interesting that I would have taken people to the conjunction that happened again. Sure, it wasn't in the same kind of grand alignment of looking like they're right on top of each other. Again, that's more of just a look, right? But I would have taken them to the 1284 with Pluto. That was with both Jupiter and Saturn in that same spot.
Yeah.
And that's what brought my predictions of this whole thing coming out. But I feel like the world did not, and still isn't, and I think that's the worst part of what we're seeing right now in the world, is they're not including, and I'm not talking just astrologers, like it's so many people, or even historians. I think that you know, let's say some of these places might have some of them or whatever, but like there are so many that probably know so much more about how events like this happen through history and different parts of the world.
Right.
It's like there's not conversations happening, and there's just no.
It's so strange.
It's very strange that you would think, especially whether you watch movies, right? If it's like I remember watching Armageddon, right? It's like they keep it secret at first, but once it's kind of revealed, like they get everybody they can together, even the Russians, right? They're like, get that, get the Russian guy and throw him up there and throw the nuclear bomb up on the asteroid or whatever. But everybody comes together and figures something out. But it's like, no, there's something about this that everybody's like. There's something else going on when you see something like that. Because if it was as dire straits as it was, that's when people come together. In any situation.
Right.
There's something about when, you live here, there's earthquakes, right?
Yeah.
Even Mrs. Kravitz, who doesn't talk to you, when everybody gets out on the street to make sure you're okay, you finally meet Mrs. Kravitz, you know what I mean? That wasn't talking.
Right. It's, what's so strange is that, so first of all, no one was talking about it publicly or or questioning anything or brainstorming ideas for what do we do about it, right? We were just told immediately, wow, here's the problem. We need this solution and go back to your homes and don't talk to anybody. It's like even though we're all connected already, it stopped all these conversations. We could have been bringing in the experts virtually, right? Through all the Zoom. But no, what we use our Zoom for? I'm not resentful about Zoom at all, but it was like, oh, let's carry on with the same old meetings. And it's like it was all about maintaining our lives as they were, but in a virtual environment. And just accepting it and not looking for explanations, right?
No, not at all. Because, Zoom made a lot of money this year.
Yeah, they sure did. Was Zoom behind all of this?
Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting. It'd be interesting to see the stockholders' certificates of people who happen to be pushing this agenda and see if they had invested in Zoom and pushing Zoom.
That would be interesting, yeah.
That's not talked about. But what I think the main thing is that how fast because there was actually drills with this just in October, right? Mm-hmm. So months before it.
Yeah.
And it already had allotted like Johns Hopkins University as like they're the ones that we're going to work with, right? Mm-hmm. And they happen to only be working again with this whole health. Like health seems to just be kind of pigeonholed into one subject matter. When I look up at the zodiac of all like these, paintings of the zodiac here, it's like, sure, there's that individual aspect, but the different aspects, some of them being harder to other ones, help that energy out, right? So the opposition to health is Pisces, which is spirituality. Mm-hmm. So I think it's ironic that, this year there was the first time we've ever seen since, you're the historian, when was it that, well, actually it would probably be opposite, right? It would probably be like the forcing of spirituality or religion per se on people, where this has been no, we don't want you to practice it.
Right.
Is there ever been a time in history that you can think of as a historian that...
Where people don't want you to be
They don't
religious?
want you to... maybe there's been in certain dictators or maybe kings or queens or somebody that said, no, don't practice that religion, practice this one. Right?
Well, in any of the governments that were trying to institute, like you said, like a dictatorship, you take away religion so you could replace it with the cult of the leader. Or,
right.
Like the French Revolution was all about also kind of taking away religion, or not taking it away, but replacing it sort of, or a little bit with the idea of the state. So everybody could become, could unify behind the idea of the state and national values.
That's
and
true.
And so that was, though, coming out of a context of where there was all sorts of religious fighting. So it made sense to try to unify people behind a new government, right? A revolution was happening and had happened.
Right.
So, but it's funny that our founding fathers did not do that, but instead wrote it into the Constitution that you would have the freedom to have your own religious beliefs, and the state wasn't going to dictate
intervene,
religious belief. So isn't it sort of saying science matters more than spirituality? Isn't that a type of religion, though?
That's what's interesting, is that's what's the new state that's trying to be kind of thrown in is government approved, backed with money and controlled science.
Right.
Right? Because they're paying these scientists with taxpayer money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting just to even see like like the new COVID bill, right? Like everybody woke up on this one. Like it doesn't matter if you're left or right. Like what are you all doing in there? Like who's the one who's saying, yeah, give all this money to these countries that we don't even, we're not even hearing world news anymore. Like you and I were just watching about a bunch of stuff with Australia and China and the trade war that's happened with coal and the blackouts that are going out. And I didn't even know, I was going to be honest, I thought Australia had kind of wimped out and was letting China kind of take over them the way that the lockdowns are going and all that. And then, boom, Australia's been responding back and actually, cutting China off of coal. And then the Chinese CCP are telling people that they have to live without power. So we're not getting all the messages of what the world's doing, in America at least, right? We're just getting, and then there's been this mutation of the virus, right? I have to go through so many crazy media channels just to be able to see that they're freaking out about this around the rest of the world. America's just like, it's fine and 150 million people are traveling. And Fauci says not to worry, but he also said exactly when Saturn was at this position, 0 into 1 degrees of Aquarius, like, no, they don't need to wear a mask. You're not going to have to worry about that. Da, 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 da. And like he's already fucked up a bunch. And then if we're saying this whole thing's true, because I think that this mutation is, again, getting to the whole new science is the new religion. I mean, right when William Shakespeare, could you believe that was the second person that got injected with the
I
thing in
didn't
the
hear
arm?
that. What?
That was
I
the
did not
name
hear
of
it.
the man, and then they picked a woman.
Okay.
Right?
Wow.
Okay. And that's exactly when
That's
the
weird.
mutation in the UK comes out. They're saying that they had seen maybe one case or something in September, but if it was that big a deal, it would have been all over the place in the science community and so forth, right? And scientists would have been tripping out. But it's ironic that the second that the first injections start coming to people in the country, that's the first one, is where the mutation is. Then, so South Africa has it, another mutation, which is really intense. Like the minister of health out there is freaked out because young people are getting it.
Yeah.
And it's like putting them to critical.
Right.
When you hear critical, it means you might die. So, but we're not being told that. But the minister there is saying that, and that's 95% of the cases down there. But people are like, oh well, they're not getting the shots down there. It's like the travel from the UK to South Africa has been going on nonstop. Today was the day they finally cut the travel off.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
heard that.
but it's again this whole science thing of not anything that has an introspective into things from other places is just not looked at. And what's weird is the media is controlling that narrative.
Yeah, it is weird. While we're talking, I was just sitting here thinking, if I were a historian in 50 years, looking back at all of this, when you zoom back like that, what would this all look like, right? Because I do history of early modern Europe, and it's, there's not a lot of documents, and so you really have to look for things like, the first guy that got second guy that got the immunizations, William Shakespeare, and this happened in England. Like, as a historian, I would even think, that's a little bit odd. You might want to investigate something like that. You look for these moments that kind of stick out, and then you delve into it and try to see what else can you find out about it. So then I think, well, but today, everything's documented. Everybody can be
That's
on
true.
Twitter and talking about it. So I wonder, and it's funny, like there's so much information that you would think a historian in the future would be able to tell this story. But that's almost why, the media is really coming out with just one story and not even validating the other side by acknowledging any other arguments other than what's in the mainstream media, It makes it harder for somebody to one day look at what really happened, although maybe it'd be easier because they might look at every document, right? They'll see everything.
Yeah, because it's almost like maybe 100 years from now, are they going to just be watching clips of news reports?
They might not even watch that at all, right?
Right. Like a true story would probably be like, that's propaganda.
They might wonder instead. They'll be like, "What?
Like
why do these people make all those decisions?"
Like people,
'Cause
like
they won't see it.
we'll use World War II for example, and Hitler, right? Like when you do the history of that, you look at you look at what he said or what was said as more of like, okay, this is what he said, but you look at the internal documents in the Nazi Party at that time, and that's how you go. That's what happened.
Right.
Right. You don't go off. Okay,
Right.
he said this,
Yeah.
and this is the speech. You look at, oh, he burned books, like or.
People don't even look at that now.
But
right? Like,
somebody was saying like, "Oh, it's Christmas Eve. Is there any positive things?" And I think
all positive.
I think the positive is that the narrative here and the belief that's going around and the way that a lot of this is being, manipulated and there's so many great insights, and I think that's what the high vibe is of tonight, that you all and yourself and your family tonight, or your friends, or if you're just hanging out with us tonight, that we're all questioning things. Doesn't mean we know the answers, but that's
and
the
having conversations.
And having conversations. And I mean, what else is there? There's a lot of things we can talk about in life, right? But there's something about this where it's almost like, whether you want to call that God or whether you want to call it divine, that has been having us all look at this for some reason and say, pay attention to this and question it. There's something that feels divinely that a lot of people are called to do that.
Right.
And instead of feeling like oh, that's maybe a negative and tonight we should be talking about something else, but it's almost like if you kind of go, what else is there to talk about?
Well, especially
we all feel that after all that it's like we all got funneled into this, but God wanted us to be in it. It's almost like God's putting us through a very big moment here and everybody to become aware. It kind of feels like there's no escape, right? But really, you wouldn't want that, because it's almost like God doesn't want you to miss out on whatever this is all bringing up and whatever this is all crystallizing into.
Yeah.
Even though it looks scary, it's the fear that, oh, I just can't go to my life and get out of it, I mean, what is there to go talk about in the old world anymore? That's gone.
Yeah.
There's memories.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot to talk about with, I feel like this is all really building up, or it has built up to a lot to talk about all of a sudden to me. And I think it's interesting in today's, I think it was in your horoscope today, or maybe it was Deep Astrology. You were talking about, how we have this calendar and that we have the institutions that the Christians instituted under the Roman Empire, right? That we've got Christianity, but in order for Christianity to survive in the 300s, it kind of got attached to the Roman Empire. You were talking about this, right? So hopefully you remember that you talked about it. And that in expanding, they had to incorporate all these pagan holidays too. So then you get something like Christmas, where we've got all these pagan traditions connected with the story of Christ. But it all really kind of works together because it's the story of the year going to the light side of the year for the north, right? For the sun coming into the world, and then the Son of God coming into the world. It kind of really matches up. But part of that story is being like seeing the light, right? Like suddenly the veil is lifted and, oh, we're seeing now a different time, or a different answers to these stories. Right. And that matches up with the astrology too, right? So
it does. And there's some interesting comments about, some people saying, of course, that this has been a time about the rebalancing of the world and that the world was tired. But I feel that it's our consciousness and our energy of souls and where we were running energetically. Again, I'm a believer in frequency and energy, as we were open this whole discussion about energy types and frequencies, that Earth's tired because we're tired.
Right.
Earth would be happy if we were happy.
Yeah.
But just how Pixie's sitting on your lap, right? Like we're basically the lap cats to, or dogs, to like Gaia, which would be our mother, right? Like, so if we are the individuals on top of this mother, not comfortable and happy and feeling tired and feeling like it's all bad, and, you know, there's also perspective or beliefs about what's happening in the world and how it should look.
Right.
Like there's this whole idea that the world should look one way all the time. That's the idea, like that's a human idea.
Is that anyway?
Right? When, I mean, this room won't look like this for the rest of its life.
Right.
Like even Earth changes, right? You just see the levels of the rocks over geologists over the millions of years.
Yeah.
That, you know, of course it's not fun to see Earth changes that don't look good or that emotionally attach, but there's something about it to where it's like, there's also people manipulating the world itself in order to take control of other people and blame it on others, when other people are just, we're just born into this world trying to live our good selves and good life.
Right.
And then there's this whole like narrative that you are the bad person, like you're the cause, you're the bad person, when I think that what's made us feel tired, to go to this comment, that Gaia's tired of humanity being tired by basically being kind of like put into that, I guess you could say, cycle.
Yeah.
And I think if like information, because you're the historian, especially not like, I know in America there was a lot of pamphleting, right? It was like pamphlets that had information to get around to people. But that goes pretty much as far back as when, because it was harder to print on paper back in the day.
Right.
So like, my question would be, if we're going to use this Jupiter-Saturn in the 800-year cycle of the last time, in the 1200s, I would say, right, like if to get a message to somebody, let's say from the Catholic Church, which was really starting to get its power then, right, like bigger than ever, they would have the money to like write on paper and send somebody on a horse to get somebody. But it's not like the average person just was mailing or was writing with written anything.
But the church itself, so like where you would see the information dispersing at that time would have been the church itself, who was, they were getting more and more texts that had been in the former Greek world, right, that were coming from the east. And then so within the church there was like all this information that was being written and copied out. So your monks, you would have all these monks copying scripts, and then that's how the information was being exchanged within the church. But people, like your average person, was cut off from all of that learning, you know. And universities were getting a start at that time, which is an interesting thing too. And information would be exchanged that way, but only amongst the really elite people.
Right.
You know? But everyone else didn't need the information, right? It was subsistence life. You had to farm and survive, right?
Right.
You needed to find your way to survive.
And if I take that old model, or like even like 1300s when the Black Plague comes, I mean, the information probably pretty much spread through, what happened to them? What happened to them? What's going on? You know, like, I don't think, there's probably no record, but I don't think that the king came out of the castle and said, "There's a black plague, be careful and make sure you wash your hands and wear a mask." Or wear flea spray. There was none.
There wasn't flea spray, that's right. And they didn't know also that the fleas were transmitting it, you know? But what was happening was the church was going out and telling people, you know, you aren't living right, or you might not be doing your prayers correctly, or, you know, they thought that the origins were
Nothing's changed.
Right? So...
It's just shifted in the, you didn't wear your mask, that's why.
Right, and that's what I keep thinking is that we know from that time looking back in the 1300s, right? We know what was causing the plague, or we think we know, I guess. It could, I mean, maybe it was that they did some sort of spiritual bad thing. We don't know, really. But we see this explanation now, and we know that all the stuff they were running around and doing wasn't working. So when you look at today, and you think about like all of this hope being pinned on one thing as the solution, it is so much like what was happening during the era of the Black Death, or it was like.
You bring up something that just blows my mind right now about that they didn't know it was fleas, right? And if I remember correctly, people just threw their slop right in the street, and the pigs would come and just eat the slop, right? That was in the streets. That's how they fed the pigs. So like your leftover lettuce and cabbage or
Right, and
whatever, and your waste of your waste.
And the waste of all the horses. Like when you think about the transportation was animals. So your animals were doing the farming, so there was all that waste that would have been all over too.
And so the rats would come and eat the waste with the food, with all that, and then they got fleas, and then they got bacteria, because that was a bacteria infection. But it's almost like we don't really know the whole. Like, if you noticed, they kind of stopped on the bat idea and then just never gave us anything else, right? And then nobody's been allowed into China to figure it out. So right now we're dealing with something where we don't know what it is. That's the truth. We're told it transmits this way and so forth.
Right.
But yet everything they tell everybody to do, everybody's doing it.
Right, but we don't really
it's
know.
gotten worse. So.
And it's like the plague.
Right, so
everybody knew, if we leave the community right now, we won't get sick, but they didn't know why, right? So they would, if you were rich enough, you left and you went up to your mountain retreat or whatever. But that didn't prevent the plague from spreading. But it's kind of important to know.
Because
what
fleas go on people too. And back then, it wasn't like you had running water and a shower. So.
Right. They had cats. You're safe here with your cats, because that's places that had the most cats had the least amount of plague victims.
Really?
I mean, it's funny because that was something else that happened in certain places in Europe, was if you had people who all of a sudden were like anti-black cats or anti-cats, thinking that they were demonic or something, and then they would go slaughter them. So then your plague would pick up. So it would make it even, it would affirm what you already believed. Because the cats eat the rats. But it would have been like, wait, these people were really evil, because look at the plague just took off there, right? So it's funny because everything that they did to try to solve it always ended up affirming their wrong belief that it was God punishing them in some way.
Right, or there was a bunch of people in here being like, Gaia's mad and Gaia's doing this. And I understand seeing the earth, and I'm with you on that, and the nature elements of things. But nature is much more than just Gaia. It's also the planets and space. That's another thing. And then the oceans, right? That we know little about what's happening in the oceans. And that's been hard to see too. But the main thing has been watching the sun making its radical observations that we've never been able to do. Just with the last 10 years, we've been able to actually look at the sun, right? And actually have the ability to see sunspots every day, see the solar activity, all of the energy that the sun's emitting, and then our poles are shifting. They literally are shifting. They always are shifting on every planet, and they do it at different rates, but Earth is definitely getting weirder and weirder and weirder, and that's created an electromagnetic sphere that's 25% lower than what is normal, and then you're adding all these cosmic energies coming in. So my belief, being an astrologer and looking at this and thinking of the way that they wouldn't have, fleas are so tiny. Like I've said before, like when flea infection comes in a house, it only happened once in my life, when I lived on my own. Some girl I know brought a dog to the house with my poor cats, and it was full of fleas, and we all got fleas, all three of us, and I had to flea, you know, but I don't like putting the flea stuff on them. They're never around fleas. But I had to do the whole flea thing, and then I had to bomb the house, and I had to do the whole thing, right? But you don't even know. You can't even see them. They're so small. You only know once they've pricked, they bit you. They're so little. They just jump so quick. But like the cosmic energy that's coming in, and I know a lot of people also associate it with, you know, these things and what's happening with these, right? Which I think is very, 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 there's a lot of evidence to that. But I think because that's invisible too, right? You can't, you and I have no idea, or any of you right now have no idea how much frequency and signal, unless you, I guess, had a frequency signal receiver that would be receiving those different frequency and the different hertz at what it's at to be able to determine how much the signal is and how much you're receiving. But again, you'd be in the middle of it. But it's the unseen at the moment that is the cause to what's happening.
Unseen, unknown, and uncategorized.
It's funny that history was the 1300s of the Black Plague, which was that Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, and Capricorn at the end of the 1200s into the 1300s that obviously was this unforeseen thing. And it's interesting that we're still dealing with an unforeseen thing. And it was funny that you bring up that the history was all the ways in which they told people that they were doing things wrong and the way that you need to handle this didn't work, yet we're seeing that now.
Yeah, and I do think actually there is something about people who say Gaia's mad, right? In this way, that what we aren't doing, and it's the same thing that was happening before, is we don't look at individuals in the context of their whole environment. And I feel like that's one of the really bad things about this, and it was before too, in that we think we're not looking at what could have been causing people's immune systems to go down. And it is also about the way we were living that was not sustainable, right? That puts a lot of stress on people. And we were hearing so much about that until this happened.
Right.
Now that this has happened, so many things that we've just come to learn about what affects people's immunity, that's not being implemented because it's just about like a very few people's ideas about what we should be doing. And then that prevents us from zooming out and seeing the bigger picture of how we're part of this whole environment. We are part of an ecosystem, so we need to look at every aspect, not just ecosystem, like an economic system, a social system, cultural system, you know.
Well, like, you know, it's Christmas Eve, so the last couple of days, right, it's been just crazy, people running out to go get Christmas gifts, right?
Right, yeah.
And, you know, whether it's Target or wherever you got to go, like, you know, there's a bunch of rules now of like, okay, only so many people in, but it gets to a point to where there's so many people, they just like, just let everybody go, because one, they want to make their money. Two, it's just people are mad outside, and three, you're already around more people. If this thing's about being around people, right? It's so, does it make sense that you congregate everybody into these spaces, but to be free and to just go kind of be in your own circle or go out in nature, you know, you can't go do that with anybody from another household yet. You're allowed to be with everybody from the other household.
Right. We could all
at a Target.
It's like, well, let's forget about our camping trip. Let's just go to the Target outdoor aisle and look at tents because that's allowed.
Right, exactly. But you can't go use the tent.
Right.
There's a bunch of camping grounds that are saying because of this COVID, you're not allowed to camp right now. I'm an RVer, right? So I don't like going to camps anyways. I like dry camping, but that's what's kind of crazy is the history is repeating itself. What's even more interesting is the flips I see when events happen in astrology. Like we're at the precursors of a civil war astrologically, and we're seeing that it's, you know, finally, I think it was great that the racial issues came to its full influx here of like, we can't keep the last parts of this, and any parts that are still deep within it have to be addressed, right? But at that same time, a new slavery is becoming of more of a collective or people who are non-essential.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Non-essential.
And then you add so it's like flipping.
Yeah.
And then you see this idea of the church telling people that you're not praying enough and stuff. Now it's the government saying, and it's not with kings either, because we're living in times where the monarchs are pretty much without their power, that no, so it's the people running the people. Technically.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like we've internalized that outside authority voice.
Right.
The outside authority tells us, here's what we need to do. And then we are the ones who enforce it. I mean, what I see as a historian from all of this, and I actually told my kids this the other day, is the instant that you see the government sort of telling you to be, to be tolerant, I guess. Like, so let's take the race issue. When they start telling us, oh, we've been treating these people badly and the system's not fair, that's when you know they are so checked out of the system. So they've deemed it okay for us now to be accepting and tolerant of each other. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
because they already know there's something else now that they're more concerned about. Like there's some other division that they want to maintain. So they are allowing us, or they're like pushing us to be accepting in this area, because it's like when there's a right given, you have to look at what's the right they want to take away. I mean, and that's just from a historical perspective.
Right.
That's what I would investigate.
Which is interesting, because the times of this last transit, the 760-year transit I'm talking about, which was 1284, and really, the 1300s is a weird time, because they do call that the Dark Ages. Mm-hmm. And that was because also at the same time, like, that was the end of, in churches, you didn't see stained windows anymore, in cathedrals. And cathedrals stopped being built in 1300s as much. It was much more 1100s and 1200s, and there was these beautiful glass. And then art also went down.
Right.
And that's also, the Black Plague came around, 50% of the population was taken away. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty dark time. There wasn't a lot of records either being kept, and you weren't able to keep track of all of it, because you're probably just trying to figure out how to, what was going on. Yeah.
I mean, I'm always really interested in those periods of time when there's transitions, because I think it's, I don't want to say, I always say I think it's really exciting that the plague came through and shook up society so much, because what had actually happened is that, people realized, oh, the church wasn't actually helping us in this whole situation. The ideas people already had were breaking down, and it was a huge paradigm shift, right? Like, well, that's not working anymore, so let's start figuring out what will work for this new world. And
and that was the same time as the Crusades, and the Crusades coming to their end, right? Because there was that whole idea of taking over the Holy Land from the church, and that was from multiple different countries.
Yeah,
it wasn't like in the Crusades, the Knights Templars were all English or all French or all, back then it would have been Portugal, right? So Portuguese, like it was everybody who was part of the crown, or the real crown, which was the Pope, right? So like that was a little bit of a wake up for people, but it still wasn't enough until, the next Saturn Pluto of the 15, 17, and 18, that was Martin Luther, and that's your favorite time. My favorite time is going from 1500s into 1600s and seeing that wake up, which we're in that right now too, but that Pluto element has that scarier quality of the unseen. And I think that, of course right now there's the unseen, we say it from asymptomatic to, oh gosh, it could be in the air, but it's something that's still beyond that, right? Look beyond, wherever they tell you that's what's on the unseen, there's more unseen behind it.
Right.
And I think what you bring up that's quite interesting is that the church during that Crusades time, so they failed on many fronts. They failed on, we can hold the Holy Land, we're powerful to do that. Didn't happen well. And then it wasn't that the church itself really, I think, killed all the Knights Templar, but I think it was one of the kings who was it? I think it was King. Forgot his name anyway, but the Catholic Church was part of it, and like it's been denounced and apologized for. But to kill all the Knights Templar was a pretty big deal. And then you come into the Black Plague, and do this and do that, and it doesn't work. And you're right, there is a little bit of that. This isn't working anymore. And I think that's where people are already at quicker, though, because the way that life works now, and there's more people on the planet, and there's more awareness, and there's videos, and and I think that there's a lot of I don't know how to deal. We don't want to lose that. Back then, you had a lot more time.
Right.
You had years, you had decades of I got power, and nobody's going to say anything or
right.
do
So
anything.
when a transformation happened, it would have been many more years. That transformative time lasted a really long time.
Yeah, and the outer planets weren't found yet.
Right.
It wasn't until those documents I showed you from like Flood and the Hermetic, and we were talking about the Golden Dawn, or we were talking about the Rosicrucian period, that these, I call them just Hermetic, alchemists, but they were alchemists, but they also were scientists, they were astronomers, they were astrologers.
Yeah.
They were health, they were doctors too, because Flood was actually a doctor in medicine, who was able to draw the three barriers that outside of Saturn's energy of all three energies, and that's 200 years, or his I think might have been 16. It was early 1600s, but still, he was over 150 years, let's say, from us finding Uranus, right, with a telescope. So. And then even Pluto 1930, but to see that if you tap into that other space, that putting things together and using the past and like looking at history and looking at the planets in a way, you're able to kind of see the future. And he was able to draw that out, and there were so many great. I mean, even Shakespeare's work was revolutionary for life.
Yeah, and I was thinking with Flood, what I was thinking in the back of my mind was, had he mathematically figured out that there must have been something there? Do you know? I don't know whether he could have, but like my favorite thing about the 1600s and I guess 15 and 1600s in terms of their scientific ideas that they were developing, was how much of it was people recognize through observation. They were doing calculations, right, with math. Then they would notice, well, this doesn't quite work, so what if it were this instead? And they do the calculations. And so you see a time where they're just trying to figure out what is actually true and doing all these weird calculations, like Ptolemy's weird epicycles.
And Ptolemy's cycles still were used, though, to create, well, I mean, whether it's Galileo or Copernicus, wherever you want to go with it.
Yeah.
They're pretty much two the same in my book. But
Copernicus still was using
was using those cycles, because that was finally all planned out and figured out from an Earth's point of view, of course, not understanding it from
but from the church's point of view too, right?
Right.
And that's why I keep thinking of that today, is just why we're holding on to something. Why do we hold on to something that's not working? It's similar to like Copernicus insisting on doing spherical orbits,
right,
and using epicycles, even though that wasn't perfect. Like they believed, well, God only would have created a perfect world,
right.
So there must be spheres. But then it's like, well, but for there to be spherical orbits, now we have to add this weird thing, and now we have to add this thing. And after a while it broke down, because it was just like, well, if God's perfect, why would all this stuff be so confusing, right? So if our
and then the church goes with Copernicus, but Galileo,
right?
But Galileo is really the one who came up with this whole idea, and it's like, so if you think about today with the governments, let's say, because you got to kind of replace that with the church, or maybe the churches and the governments are still working together. You never know, right?
Yeah, who knows?
But that's the whole thing, is like, okay, this university, John Hopkins is the one. That to me is like Copernicus, but there's other ones,
right?
Like that are Galileos, that they're saying no, even though they might be saying the same thing, but with a different, like, hey, I'm the one who, look at this. I think that that there's nothing to fear in the frontal aspect of looking at how things are, because I think you have to realize that there's a lot more going on behind the story that we haven't been revealed yet, and that's what history and astrology help reveal.
Right.
That's where you and I have teamed up, because I'm able to go right to the dates and the source and add little things I know about the people who are really involved with that. And then you have all the history and you know all different people, and we've had these amazing. That's been one of the greatest things about 2020 was when we did our documentary. And even though it's taken us a long time to kind of get high vibe together, so we can go move forward to do that more, because that's what you and I are going to be doing a lot more of. These are the conversations and these are the talks that I think people are thriving to get to help understand this world better. That I can't believe that is not being used in the world right now today, at all.
Yeah, I think for that kind of thing, I finally had this revelation the other day. Eric and I were talking about it on maybe Venus After Dark, I think was the show. And I said, or I just had the realization, why are we even worried about what the world's telling us is happening anymore? Right now is the time to tune into how we feel. And you've been saying that all the time too. Right? Tune into your intuition, and just now is the time for us to do what we know is the right thing to do, because we know we all have that inner knowledge. Right?
Well, I think J.P. Spears has been so amazing this year, and one of his latest videos was called "Communist Christmas."
Because Communist Christmas.
Well, no, think about this. He puts it in a good way. He's like, this is a time where, the government tells you who you can see and who you can't see, right? That's exactly how people in China live. Like, you are on a system in China that, gives you a social tally of score based off if you follow. And if you go spend the night at somebody else's house, you have to let the government know through your thing. They actually check your door and know it's all known, and there's cameras everywhere, right? This is the first time that a republic, or let's say a democratic society, is living like a communist way of living, as far as being told who you can see, when you can see, and on a holiday like this, that you're not allowed to go see this people. You have to be in by 10, or in Europe or UK right now, especially London. It's completely you're not allowed to go anywhere.
Right. I know my niece is in England right now. Yeah.
So, but the way that he puts it is so interesting in the video, because it's, of course, he's doing it with comedy, but it's real, and that's his way of doing it, and to make people really wake up.
Right.
That this is not normal. It's only normal in communism.
Right.
That's the only place it's ever been normal.
And we are being led to believe that
it's saving.
That it's saving, and so nobody wants to question it. But at the same time, we, unlike in China, we have a constitution that guarantees rights, right? So we actually are protected if we do want to go and push the bounds of those restrictions or those recommendations, whatever they are.
I thought it was funny. This morning I watched a guy on YouTube, and he reports on the coronavirus daily. And he's a British nurse, and he's published some books, and he got really famous this year from coronavirus because he's been retired, so he just sits at home and he goes through every country, and
I'm so thankful for people like that.
No, and he's great, but it was interesting because he's the one today who said, well, the number came out that 150 million Americans are traveling. And his disgust, and I guess, because they have that constitution that they're free to do whatever they want, and was disgusted by it, right?
Right.
So there's disgust over freedom, right? And that's kind of a narrative going around the world right now.
Yeah.
And then, but it's kind of ironic because that same disgust, even ironically from the UK, but actually it was England, happened exactly where Pluto was coming into this in 2021 into 2022.
Right.
Was the Declaration of Independence, and the disgust of, what, are you kidding me? and the way that the Brits, the songs they would sing in the Revolutionary War, making fun of the Americans, and also that they were degenerates, that they were not classy, remember they wore wigs, right? Like they wore wigs to war. You know, whenever you'd see a redcoat, you know, and they were a higher up officer, they were in wigs.
A lot of people wore wigs though too.
Of course, but there was the British officers that were elegant, right? Like and the way that they conducted the protocols of how to do war. But all the redcoats that came over came into a world that they didn't even know, right? Like, oh, you know, they're used to being like tea at 4 p.m. and, you know, they train to be a certain way, and then they run into these people that are, you know, saying, no, we're free and we're doing things our own way. And the 13 colonies were so unique in themselves, where England was, of course, it's diverse as far as parts of the north or the south or the west or different parts, but the diversity of America is very crazy, just in the terrain to the way that there's different languages of English that's where English language really started to change, was in the colonies, right?
Right. Not to mention in the colonies, you were living also with a bunch of Germans, and depending on where you were. And you had Native Americans, and there were probably Spanish in some parts close to where the colonies were.
It was pretty potluck, right? And I've always loved potlucks because I always loved buffets as a kid, because I was like, oh, I can have some Asian tonight and I can have a piece of pizza, you know? And that's what America is. But it's so interesting to hear the disgust of freedom.
Was people traveling from South Africa to England that started the new virus strand.
And so, but it also is, you know, could have been somebody from England that traveled there. And China just banned the UK from flying. And he thought he was like, how ironic is this? That now China's like, we don't want this in here, you know, when we were the ones being like, should we ban China or not?
It's just time to
And the UK did not ban China flights.
Yeah.
So that's when they got hit really hard.
Yeah. I mean, when you start to see those sorts of things happening where people are holding so fast to this one idea of what's working, right? Like, let's go to the redcoats, right? People, you should be acting like this with these sorts of rules in warfare. It's a gentleman's way of fighting, right?
Right.
But those notions were breaking down here, right? And so you have like the old belief systems that don't work anymore for the way society actually is, or for the actual environment. People trying to hold up those ideas, and it doesn't work, right? Like, probably even if we weren't all traveling, the new strand of the virus would have appeared, right? It's just, isn't that just what happens? Like, don't viruses mutate? Is it only through travel? And
well, I mean, that's where, and I'm not that either, but I just am somebody who looks at things like there is no coincidence. There's no coincidence that the UK is the country that approved the Pfizer version of the shot first, implemented it first, and is the first place to report a mutation.
Right.
Which uses a shot that mutates your DNA.
Right.
I mean, to me, after watching enough X-Men that they've been putting in front of our face, a lot of the documents that are coming out that they've been trying to mutate. So when people get worried about Gaia earlier and how what we're doing,
right,
it's more like there's actually a crazy group of people in government and stuff that are playing with science and genetically engineering, whether it was GMOs with food, to including plant life or animal life, and playing with a lot of things, and then blaming it on people for what they use, like CO2 and stuff like that. Not saying that that's not part of it, but
right,
there's way more quicker and weirder changes. And I'm somebody who's listened to Coast Radio on AM for, I don't know, 15 years. And there's so many people that have come on from, whether they had to work down in Antarctica or they had to work all the way up at the North Pole, and how there's these crazy operations that have been going on there for years, trying to pierce through these ice walls. that the government's obsessed with, trying to figure out this weird stuff. You know, and then it reminds me of Sarah McLachlan commercial with, you know, a cat or a dog, right? And how there's this whole just like, please donate, you know, every week or every month so you can help a dog. I remember back in the day, you don't see them anymore. Remember, it was you could rescue a kid in Kenya or in Libya, or,
I know.
right? And then you would get their picture sent, and they would do the commercials for that. What happened to that, right? There was a lot of scams, that's why. But there's that whole emotional pull when it comes to the environment of showing, like, this is what the scientists see out here, right? And so they get like the most dramatic shots they can of an ice wall falling and polar bears that aren't doing well and stuff. And the WHO just released yesterday, or sorry, it was the UN just released yesterday, that the world needs to stop creating crisis after crisis after crisis. The way we live just creates crisis. But that's just, the world is always going to be going through some sort of, it's not even crisis, it's just changes, right? Like, that's like trying to say, like, I will never slip and fall in the bathroom again in my life, right? Like, we will all do that. Or today I fell a couple times and hit my, you know, and we always, there's no way to live life perfect and have it normal and have the earth look a certain way the whole time and to keep humanity looking the same way the whole time. And there's some sort of this weird obsession with perfectionism in that kind of way that's going around, that's kind of implementing all these, and they want to now apply that in the UN to climate change. So the same restrictions that are happening for COVID is what that says they want to apply for climate change. But there's been the cell tactic, when really, if you look at a lot of the data, you can see that the same people that are putting that out are the ones investing in and putting money in the most radical scientific engineering to play with the environment, whether it's HARP going back 20 years, 30, 25 years and playing with frequencies to change weather patterns, to, you know, you have to see that really the weirdest stuff isn't so much of what is being blamed on people to lock them down.
No.
Same thing with the coronavirus and being the spreaders of it. Who originally put it into the earth are the same people that, and I said in 2018 that a plague would be coming and it would not be normal and it would not feel natural from God, like as if the bubonic plague would, the shit in the streets and the pigs that are eating it and the horse crazy trough mixed with, you know, a rat that's eating from there that gets a flea that gets bacteria and it infects and it's jumping on other fleas and spreading around a bacterial infection and virus that affects human beings. That seems natural. This thing does not, right? Because if it was, there would have been plenty. I mean, it's so funny that South Park's given us more information on what it was during their pandemic special of a guy having sex with a bat with Mickey Mouse that caused it. Does that make sense? That we never got the full story, and that we don't get the full story on the climate change thing either. And the full story is definitely there is earth changes, there is weather changes, but the main one is nobody's looking at the sun. There are scientists looking at the sun, but they're not being talked about. There's some that are in that climate change things who are finally starting to see, oh, the sun's energy, the other planets are heating up.
Right.
The other planets are going through their changes, right? Like they're just realizing that there was water on Mars. There's also, we just found out in the last month and a half, there was water on the moon. There's more to it all than you really see. And so remember when people get like lost in the Gaia fear of how the planet is, the Sarah McLachlan commercial is what I always try to remind them about. Is like, that's what you've been sold. Look deeper yourself. Get out of the emotion for a second and ask if Sarah McLachlan really cares or how many times did she have to do her makeup. And she wasn't even there with the animals that they show in the videos.
Right, and you know, I'm sorry, but also use your emotion and direct it at the right people. Why do we continue? Because this is the part that really bothers me, because the Inquisition way back when wouldn't have worked if people weren't informing on their neighbors.
Which was the
Right?
which was the communist thing in the USSR with
And
Stalin
then
and
that's how all these systems
right.
stay in place, is because we're convinced by a power outside of ourselves to feel bad, to feel like we sinned, to feel like we're dirty or germ spreaders or whatever it is, or polluters, right?
Right.
Meanwhile, who's actually creating the biggest pollution? It's like corporations that are manufacturing things, and the people who want us to feel bad are the ones who've got stuff invested in creating the pollution.
Well, that's what's
right?
even crazy with the Paris Climate Accord. Like, America actually has reduced its emissions so much that its impact is not as much, even close to China, or the amount of waste of plastics.
Right.
There's actually countries that are higher than America, believe it or not. America has done a great job over so many years, of decades. Remember, recycle, reduce, reuse, and join the loop. Like, I remember that as a kid, right? We've been indoctrinated into doing this stuff, and we actually do it. Everybody, when you go to somebody's house, you feel weird if you're trying to throw away a piece of plastic without somebody like, do you have a recycle bin in here? Like, I don't want to throw it in your trash, right? That's like, that's an American thing.
Good. That's a good thing.
So the idea that in America that we're just like this worst polluter, if you look at the data, it's China. And for some reason, nobody wants to do anything to China, because Apple, everybody, in your iPhone, what you're watching this on right now, all the stuff that you're getting your Amazon stuff from, those are the people that get it all made in China, and those are the people that are investing in all the candidates and all the people that they want, and the tech companies that are producing this to even get out to you of what they want you to hear, and to not put any of the blame on China and not put any of the blame on them when they're the ones who are actually investing in all of the stuff in the back end of all of it.
Right. And if we just looked at the economics of it all and looked at the numbers, but not like the huge fearful numbers that nobody ever analyzes,
right,
that don't really mean
those
anything.
Are the scary numbers that you're talking about.
Yeah, let's actually look and analyze who's making money and where.
Right.
Because it's not anything about ethnicity or race or I don't even know what else it is now. It's like those are the smoke screens that get thrown up to get us all diverted onto you're being this way or you're doing that, or to police each other, while they're just sitting back and continuing on with their business. Right?
In Hollywood, it used to be, they always said, oh, the Jews own Hollywood, right? No, now it's China. Like Legend Entertainment to Sony Pictures. China bought a bunch into that. China's bought in so much. There was a movie that just came out on Apple TV, like if you could buy it, and it had Arnold Schwarzenegger on it, and I was going to buy it because it looked like a history movie, and it was about like some jail or something. It was a Chinese produced picture. Right? So like the investment in our media, the investment in so many areas of our life right now that we're using everything is all based upon Chinese. So the idea that that's just conspiracy or something, when you look at the actual numbers and you start to take a look around, you have to realize that a lot of people, like, the Secretary of State just came out, I think it was 2 weeks ago, he went to Georgia Tech and did a talk on how $1.6 billion in the last, I think it was like 3 to 5 years, was given freely to universities around America by the Chinese. But that's when you start seeing them say, no, you can't have this person speak at this college, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you wonder why. It always, I think it's always been like, oh, it's because maybe a liberal speaking and that's more of a conservative college, or no, it's a conservative speaking and it's a liberal. No. It has to do with who's ever given you the money is on the phone being like, hey, you won't get any more money if we see that again.
Right.
So the person might even be liking the person, but, I don't want to stop the money coming through and I'm in that place. It reminds me during well, it would have been during the Tudor line, but it would have been like, when King Henry VIII left the Catholic Church and the cardinal that was with him, because I had to take a lot of this just from the show, Tudors, but, it reminded me of like the scratch your back, like he had to be the in-between, right? There was always a cardinal that was attached from the church that was always with the king or the queen, whether it was in France or whether it was in England, right? Or Portugal, right? that was the liaison back and forth, right? And so you have the king or the queen scratching the back of the cardinal to get what it wants from the Pope and to allow to do more stuff. Then you have the Pope scratching the back, but that's a tough position to be, right? That's like a lobbyist in today's world, right? There's more lobbyists than politicians now. And you got to realize that was a tight spot where he's like, no, keep it Catholic. Don't go create this Church of England. Like, you can work it out. Like, who cares if you don't like your wife? Go fuck all these other chicks. I don't care. To stay this way, which is totally against what the religion is anyways, just because he's so stressed that he doesn't want to be the cardinal. That's the one that had an out-of-control king who left the church and created the Church of England. So that's what the times we're in. And there's this pressure on a lot of people, pressure on judges, pressure on everybody to... And then, like I was telling you, I was walking down this hallway, and like, a lot of people who are going with the narrative right now, it's like they're being promised a new future. I've been promised that in Hollywood a lot. Like, if you do this, we can't pay you now, but if you do this real, you show up and sign this contract, in the future, you'll get paid. Those are the deals that never work out.
Right.
And they never care about those people at the end of the day, because once they do get the money or they do get the job, they go, oh, shit. I have the money now and I want to do this with it, and I actually don't really want you, and you did help. And then so there's a lot of that going on right now too. The promise of, I'll put you in this place if you just go through with this. And so.
Well, that's why it's important for people to know their own value, right? Like to know that you're worth more than that, to never take those kind of deals, and to never accept all the blame. Like, my big thing is also, when you look at history, or when you look at today and you look at the complexity of everything, that there's so much more than just one explanation for things, right? It's never just one thing. So if we're ever being told it's just one group of people, or it's just one method that works,
it's true.
No, it's not. And we need to question it or look for our own answers, right? Don't ever wait for someone else to give you the answer, would be my advice.
Yeah, somebody put an interesting comment, and I think it's important to pay attention to. It's like somebody said, is China the fleas? And I'm like, no, because the Chinese people are people like you or I, or any of us watching, who are under the control of just a very few people who are telling them what to do. And unfortunately, they're in really way worse conditions, right? And then the only people that are allowed to create their own businesses, like Huawei, who did all the 5G stuff, who now Australia said no, now the UK backed off on a bunch of that, America said no, right? That, they were given like green lights to be kind of capitalistic in a way. So only certain people can be green lights, but it's got to give money back to the government and have a purpose of what the government wants to do business, right? Where that's communism is, it can look capitalistic, but it's only capitalism when it's going to benefit the country in the country's like direct manner of those in control that want another agenda. Where true capitalism is the government's not in your face about it. Like, you want to go sell whatever you want to do. Sure, they take tax money. Yeah. But even that's something that the Revolutionary War was about, right? So, we're at a kind of different level. That's what's kind of crazy. We're at a different level now. We're at like really way more than that. Taxation without representation was a serious situation. Now it's beyond that. It's lockdown without
a voice. I don't know.
Lockdown without a voice, without authority of that lockdown.
Yeah. And I would also say, for that remark of, is China the fleas, would be, we don't know what the fleas are. Is like, we just don't know.
Yeah, that's the other thing, we don't know.
Yeah. The fleas
but
are the
and again, it's not trying to be systemic in all people and lump all of China as the people. Because I think that the people of China are under extreme duress. I mean, the video we just watched today of like the power outages since December 18th that have been going on ever since Australia pulled the coal, because they don't have enough coal. They're shutting down power and telling people you can't use your stove, you can't set your thermometers at this, and you have to go through the streets in those street lights, like in the middle of the night. Like, and people are driving around China, like,
Yeah.
right? And that's like the higher class in China, the ones that aren't having to work in the factory all day. Those people ride bicycles and walk.
Yeah.
Or live just not even in a house. They like work at a factory and then walk and then find a place to sleep in some weird place, you know, like it's, and it was an interesting combo, but these are definitely the combos of the future for this network, at least more.
Yeah, I would say so. And I feel bad if people were thinking, oh, it's Christmas, it's going to be some light, happy conversation. But see, for me, and probably for you, this is fun.
It is the light. The light
This
is
is,
information.
It is, yeah.
The darkness is when you suppress information. So the idea of like, I don't want to hear something in life is actually you putting yourself through kind of a dark moment, right? And naivety. It might work for a second,
right?
But it's going to come back up in your face the next day or something like that, you know? And you make your own choice if you don't want to hear something anyway by just like not expecting other people to be a certain way, right? But we're seeing that in the media. So if you don't want to watch CNN or you don't want to watch Fox News, then you don't watch those. So you can't complain anymore if you don't want to watch. You know, like you have that choice in yourself.
Right. But if you don't want to watch, also, I mean, there's a way that I think people turn it off, but then they kind of replace in their own minds the same narrative. And the narrative is always like, something is happening. There's something out there bad that's causing it all. There's one thing that's causing it. We must find that and blame that. And a lot of times people decide, okay, now I'm not going to tune into that story anymore because I have a different idea of who's to blame, right? And that's kind of what's the toxic thing that keeps replicating itself. And like we need to just step back from that whole way of thinking.
Well, and our next history in the stars was going to be about Civil War, and especially the Civil War that happened in England after King James with his son, Charles.
And it still is going to be.
And it still is going to be, but it does pose an interesting question, and maybe there's a good cliffhanger for people of like taking the history of then and how he ruled and people wanting to govern themselves. It's going to be interesting to see who does end up becoming the president here, as if, like, I don't know if people have really thought about the future as like, do you know what happens when you put people in power who are going to try and say they can do everything and fix everything and not let you do anything? Because it doesn't ever work out well. And, you know, the beheading of Charles in the middle of the square with how many people were around there? Thousands? I mean, it's hard to know the number, but the picture is pretty breathtaking, and there was children in front of it too. It poses a big question to, that's a different Civil War than like America's Civil War, you know? That one had to deal with the operation of monarch to people ruling and actually cutting the monarch's head off in the middle of the street. And that actually happened. Like, that's not some conspiracy. It's sad.
But you know, we could make the comparison in our Civil War, American Civil War, to when Lincoln's assassinated.
Right.
Because it's an incomplete.
But it's the opposite too, right? It's like Lincoln, but it wasn't to Confederates, right? Like to Confederates, it was you're taking away our freedom to have slaves. And then when the war was over, and then they did that reconstruction, right? It was Reconstruction that created a lot of diversity again, right? And strife, right? Like, okay, we're going to stay together, but we're going to be like this in the South, and you're going to still be like that in the North. We're not allowed to have slaves, but, and that's where I think a lot of the racism stayed, right? Like, because of that too.
Because it never was a full...
And that's stuff wasn't even talked about this year with the racism stuff. Like, I couldn't believe that they didn't want to get into the Reconstruction period of like, okay, so the country did come back together, but that didn't mean that the South didn't stop acting, especially, you know, that's why in all my spiritual dance music, you always hear me say, the governor, when I'm Martin Luther King speaking about the governor of Alabama. And that was where the fight started. It was with the governor. It wasn't with the president. It wasn't with JFK at first. Mm-hmm. It was with the governor. Because in the South, it was the separate. California in the 60s did not have white and black bathrooms. It was the South that did. And it was the governor of Alabama who was all about that. And there wasn't people in the back of the bus in California and stuff like that. Because that was always a union state.
Well, we did have policies like that we could get into this, but we did have like more informal racism, sort of, that was
Correct.
allowed, like in real estate, for example.
Of course. No, yes. And I remember I've done that. But I was just saying, though, that like at the peak of the 60s, you know, when civil rights movement start, is this major moment for Martin Luther King going after a governor and the governor's way of dealing with stuff. Mm-hmm. And actually people were like living in a world where it actually said it on the bathrooms, and and that all came from Reconstruction, and that all came from, you know, never fully reconstructing, if that makes sense, like half-ass reconstruction, like never building the full house back in order.
Yeah, and that was interrupted when Lincoln was assassinated.
Correct.
You know, so.
Yeah, and the presidents that came after, and also trying to do other things and. Going into other places, and if you even think of the Prohibition to the World War I, World War II, and you go into the economy crash, you go into stock market crash, you go into so many things that were before civil rights movement. That it's kind of crazy that those, you know, and women's rights actually was a major thing too after Reconstruction. Mm-hmm. So I can understand that. Racism, it's so weird that it did finally take till 2020? Reconstruction's the 1860s, the beginnings of it at least. Yeah, but that really it takes that long, and that was a you know, and that's sad.
It is. I mean, that's something that's been integrated into human society for like way even before the United States was existing, right? Like it's.
Right, but it's so weird with right when you get to the tip of that finally. Yeah. You see it now more. If there's something about this world where with one thing when it's come to its impasse and it's transformed, another form of that same energy, it's not racism now, but it's health. I don't even know what to call when you base people off their health. Like, is there a term? When you like, because I've been using the term leprosy in the last day to kind of like how they look at lepers. Like, oh, look at that, they have leprosy. Right?
There's got to be, it's like there has to be some form of discrimination against some
Correct.
group.
There's going to, and that's like, what the irony is about no pre-existing conditions has been such a big deal, right? In our healthcare system, which I think is an important thing. I mean, if you get car insurance or you get, you know, any kind of insurance, like, they don't judge based off how, you know, sure they based off how you're a driver, like as far as your driving record, to just raise the rates, but that doesn't mean they're not going to still cover you, right? That's important, but what's more important now, I think, is how you choose to determine whether you want something in your life or how you want to live your life in your health is going to determine whether or not you're getting covered. One of the things we're trying to talk about in this new thing about if you don't take the shot is why should we even work on you? They won't let you in the hospital. That's one of the proposals that are going around the world right now, and that doctors are saying is like, well, if they don't want to do that and they don't want to listen to doctors, then why do we have to go work on you then? So that there's going to be hospitals that won't let people in that aren't vaccinated, basically. That we won't work on you.
So if it starts with that, then it's, well, you traveled to that place that had tuberculosis.
Right.
We don't care. Or you, I don't even know, like so many ways that can just go down this horrible path.
Well, and there was one last thing, and I know it's a triggering thing, and I'm all about a women's choice, and the abortion thing is not something that I even, like I'm somebody who, I believe in pro-choice, so I'm a pro-choice person. But it's interesting that the amount of abortion deaths a year, okay, just in America alone, right? It's over 1 million. It's like 1.3 million fetuses are chosen to be taken away, right? A year. And, you know, we're at like almost 400,000 deaths in America, right? Yet every year we choose to abort 1.4 million or 1.3 million fetuses a year. And some are in late term that are.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with all that.
Right? So, you know, like, if that's okay, and I'm not saying it's wrong or, right? I'm not going to get into that debate. Because I'm just somebody who's like, I'm a libertarian, like, freedom.
So
if that's, I don't know the situation. I'm not involved with the doctor, the woman, and the family, and why the reason. So that's why I'm not going to get involved. But if that's okay, and we're freaking out about this, you know, you have to start taking a lot of things, right? It's like, or how many people die of heart disease a year? It's like, ever since we changed our food system, you know, in the 60s and 70s,
right,
that goes up to, you know, there's a lot of things, right? And like the rates go higher, and they used to blame it on cigarettes, but it's rare because only 20 million people in America smoke now, right? But the rates are still going through the roof.
It's interesting.
Right? Or diabetes with sugar, right? Like the sugar and how much sugar there is, it's just going through the roof. Or there's just a lot of things that just are like, this one little thing now has just taken over everything else. And there's a reason for it all. And I think that on this Christmas, it's like, don't be scared and remember all those things. And remember, sure, there is something out there and we don't know really what it is. But the way that history is always shown, whether it's you saying it or it's I saying it, from my research, it never is the people who say that are going to fix it.
And that is the truth.
I mean, even in politics, right? Like the civil rights movement was, you know, Martin Luther King. It was a lot of people who were on the ground and that were not in politics and that had a voice. And that's how it always is. It's always a voice.
Never from the top down is something changed effectively.
No. I always think of the Dalai Lama too, and how, you know, he's still alive, and how he, right, has taken Buddhism out of places to where, you know, it's not allowed. Especially China, right? There used to be a lot of Buddhists in China, and China kicked out when it went all communist. Buddhism was kicked out. So, you know, and Gandhi had to deal with a lot of that stuff too, and you know, you start getting into all that. Or like watching Indonesia right now, about to turn full Islamic, 100% law. Been talking about that one for years and preparing people for that one because it's right there, all based off the tsunami in 2004, which was because there was a mosque that stayed open or that didn't get crushed by the waves. That's why Indonesia has turned more Muslim now, and now the governments, and that's why you see parts of Indonesia where there's Islamic law 100%. And if you're gay, you're in jail. If you do this, you're in jail. If you do this, you're in jail, and then you're getting beaten by, you know, the stick, like the old Islamic law. That's all through Indonesia. It's not in Bali. That's where they make some money. But now that it's COVID, do you think they're going to continue that? Or do you think they're going to move that into that? I've always said that the biggest plot that we're going to see ever, and I'll make this prediction again, is in Bali. That's the place where all the Western country people flock to. That's where the only place where you're going to see people from Australia, UK, and America all in one place, all at the same time, in a large group of numbers on an island that is unprotected because they're not able to leave without having to get off the island, right? That you can contain, that would be Islamic energy that would come in because the government in Indonesia itself, they're moving Jakarta because it's underwater already. And they're saying that that's a Muslim thing too, like that Allah has wanted that to happen, right? Because there's so many people in the government now of Indonesia. Vice did a bunch of stuff on this years ago, but it's starting. And also, one of the heads of ISIS has been in Indonesia, that runs the Muslims out there and to the government, and to get them in the government. So, you know, that's not being talked about. But there's a lot that's like the perfect setting.
Yeah, so there's a lot out there that's not being talked about, or
no, it's not.
So.
That everything that's happening is being set up for a bigger chess game, for other moves. Not this, that seems to be the like, this is just the perfect resetting of a board game for people. Like Indonesia to take over Bali in the way they want to, like China and their world influence, like everywhere else, you'll see it everywhere else. So, but it is Merry Christmas and.
But Merry Christmas. The world will be taken over by all these crazy things. No, I'm just joking.
No, but it's interesting though, and I think I'm an astrologer, and I've been warning people that the Pluto Capricorn transit and with Saturn Pluto that we just finished, but we still have Pluto here. Pluto is the end of traditions, and so Christmas is a tradition, especially. Let's be real. Like the last, sure, it's been celebrated for longer than America's history, but really the idea of how we celebrate Christmas right now, right, with Christmas Eve and with going to get gifts and with going to the store and going under the tree in the morning and that idea, that's really an American ideal because actually in Holland it's St. Nicholas that you celebrate. It's not Santa Claus, right, and the whole St. Nick story. And it's a lot simpler, and it's not so grandiose, very Americanized. That's kind of spread throughout the world now. But traditions are ending, and so the more you feel something kind of slip away, just realize it's like.
Well, people have been feeling that for Christmas for so long.
For a decade. I know, it's been a decade long.
Like, even we were watching Charlie Brown Christmas today, or trying to, because nobody has it available right now. I mean, it's on Apple TV though, so we're going to do that later.
Oh yeah.
But it's just like even that was all about being disgusted with the commercialization of Christmas and where's the actual significance or meaning. And so, yeah, it's something like this, I guess, that can. But I feel like this is something that can get people reoriented towards what is the real meaning, or what is a more meaningful way to spend a holiday.
And I think it's not about even getting rid of the whole tradition, but just how the tradition feels and having to reconnect with it in a different way and in the way that the moment is now. I mean, this Christmas Eve, we're here talking, and I know you're already late, so we got to go. And that's just like, it's about learning to accept with Pluto. You have to receive the change. And it doesn't mean that you're going to lose it.
Yeah.
But it's just changing the way that it is. It doesn't mean, and accepting it, and then actually you realize, oh, that was a great Christmas.
Yeah. So if you fight to try to keep it exactly like it was, it won't work.
Which I would say that the number one thing, and this is the way I'll end this whole combo, is 2020 was the year of expectations that did not meet their expectations, right? The expectation that this should be done by everybody. This number should be hit by this point. If it's not, then you have to log down. The expectation that everything was the expectation that didn't get met. And so the more you keep looking for expectation, and actually I know she's one of my good friends, Christine Hassler. She wrote a book called it's called Expectation Hangover. And she maybe did it like 5 years. She's a Scorpio, like 5 or 6 years ago. But anyway, just that title, and it's powerful in itself. The book's powerful too.
Yeah.
But expectations are the biggest hangover you can have. And people are, especially with travel right now and all this stuff, expecting. It's like, look at what you have now and cherish it. That's the gift that's right now.
I like that. Look what you have and cherish it.
And I love this Christmas Eve to be able to talk history with somebody that likes to talk about it. So.
Yeah, I love talking about history in a different way.
And I mean, I'm blessed. We have just on YouTube alone over 550 people watching on Christmas Eve. So.
Well, I hope it's given them something to do because, I don't know. We all know how it is. Like you get tired of all the preparations and.
Very true.
You kind of need a break, and some people who are around families maybe that are annoying them.
That's true.
You got to have a break sometimes.
Or they're just chilling in bed or whatever. But.
And look at Pixie. She's so happy too.
Oh, my little baby. She's a very rare cat.
Yeah.
My little baby girl.
don't know what happened to Leo. I saw him a while ago.
My little Pisces she's got an Aquarius moon.
We all probably need to be more like
See
Pixie.
that, like,
Cute.
she loves your daddy.
I'm glad she's never met Sarah McLachlan or had to meet her.
No, and you know what? I was able to rescue her without Sarah McLachlan. So.
Yeah. Are you sure that didn't convince you somewhat to go to the shelter?
No.
Oh my gosh, I have to turn that commercial off whenever it comes on. I will
No,
start
because
crying.
I've been in TV for so long and producing so long that
You can see the propaganda.
I can see it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I use it myself, right? This 2021 video that I just did with the music, and I made the music myself. That like at the beginning.
Right.
See, even Pixie was like, "What?" You know, like. But that's the energy too of shadow reality. So.
Yeah.
But you know, that's how I know, right? But I'm like trying to like wake people up. That's trying to like make people feel sorry and showing images of. You don't even know where those images are, if they're even.
Yeah.
They could be actor dogs, right? They could literally already have homes and just be like, oh, my dog is really good. They have training for these animals in Hollywood, like act dead, right? Do all these things, like look really tired and sick. Crazy.
Or just the way they edit it together and the music and all
Correct,
that, right?
yep.
Or all of it.
So, well, love you all. Thanks for being with us. From High Vibe TV to you and your family, Merry Christmas and lots of love to you all. And of course, you'll see us. We're always around.
Merry Christmas.
Bye. Thanks, Ann. Bye, Pixie. I'm going to go turn it off.
All right.
Oh, bye. No, baby. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. They'll still hear me.
I'm chat while he's doing this on High Vibe.
Yep. All right, everyone. We will see you later. Adios.